Hello, everyone. I'm Hilary Sloane, and welcome to Driftwood Conversations. My guest today is Bernard Leibov, artist, curator, and founder of BoxoPROJECTS in Joshua Tree, as well as co-founder of the Joshua Treenial Desert Futures. Bernard's story starts in South Africa, a land of contrast and beauty where he first learned what it meant to pursue freedom. His journey led him to New York in the worlds of finance and art, and finally to Joshua Tree, a landscape that provides him with what he calls a sense of belonging. In our discussion, we talked about what it means to build community through art and how to create space for others while finding your own creative voice. We examine how the desert transforms us, how silence, time, and vulnerability can form the basis of new kinds of connection. For Bernard, art isn't just what hangs on a wall. It's how you live, how you listen, and how you belong to a community.
Well, I came here back in 2011, sort of permanently. And since then, I've been running an arts residency program and programming an arts programming initiative that runs alongside that. So we're just about to open our biennial called the Joshua Treenial, and we also do exhibitions in various places. So that's sort of top line what I do here. In order to make that work, I participate in the art gig economy. And so I do cultural tours here. I take people around for half a day, introducing them to various things. I curate exhibitions. I've curated most recently at the Palm Springs Art Fair and some other places. And then here locally, I also manage galleries, one for the National Park. So I manage 2 exhibitions that happen there, and more recently for the National Park Association. So it's just a little bit of a lot of things.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's new to me. I did not know that you did those other activities or jobs, careers. They can be careers.
They can be, but they're all sort of tied together, in the art sphere, and very specifically in the local art sphere. So when the Palm Springs Art Fair asked me to curate exhibitions, I was curating exhibitions of artists from the desert region, and then they had somebody from LA curating statewide. So I did a couple of exhibitions that were very sort of localized, and I think that's really where my experience and knowledge lie.
Now, when you were telling me that when you came out here to do your own work. And what is that? What does that look like?
Well, that was way back in 2008. Yes, I rented a cabin here for 3 months, and I came to just see what it would be like to be here. And at that time, I was making collage. I was collaging strictly out of Dwell magazine, and just using that as a constraint. And then since then, my work has shifted into text work. So I'm doing a lot of work with text, with various words and phrases in various mediums. These days, I'm doing a workshop at Yucca Valley Material Lab. So I've worked in glass, I've worked in paper, I've worked on wood. I did a residency in the UK where I worked in ceramic. But what ties it all together is that there are words involved.
Now, when you say worked in glass, because I love glass, do you melt it or do you glue it?
It was cast.
Oh,
so
it was
cast glass, so making the molds and then casting it, yeah.
Oh, how interesting. Let's go back a little. You were telling me how you got here.
Yeah, so back in July of 2005, it's very specific. At that time, I was working in the corporate sphere in New York, and I very much wanted to be working in the art sphere, and I was looking around at various things, and I was trying to get some sort of position at the Deer Foundation. So it's a major foundation in New York and New York State that deals with artists that can't traditionally be shown in museums. So there are people mainly from the 70s who did very large-scale earthworks and other things. And I was stalking the curator at the time, Lynn Cook, who went on to run the National Gallery here in Washington. She did an article in the July 2005 issue of Art Forum on land art, and Andrea Zattel was involved in this panel discussion. And at the back of that issue, there was a one-page article about high desert sites. And I'm generally pretty risk-averse person. I was living in New York City, not very widely traveled in the United States at that time. And I just had a calling. I was just like, I need to go. And I wrote to Andrea, and she wrote back to me, and I started coming out Initially, I came out in November of 2005 just to visit, and then I started coming out every spring for the, at that time, High Desert Test Sites event that used to happen annually in sort of March, April.
Is it still happening?
It doesn't happen anymore. No, 2022 was the last one. So it's morphed into a different structure now where they host residencies. You might know more about that.
Say that again, what residencies?
Well, High Desert Test Sites now hosts residencies.
Oh, okay.
That's not what it was previously. So it was this annual amazing sort of treasure hunt of installations throughout the desert, plus other programming, really interesting programming that they would do during the year.
So once you came out, you said you went back to New York and did shows in your apartment?
Yeah, so when I was here in 2008 for that 3 months, I met a lot of local artists, and I started to see some of the work, and I thought some of the work that I was seeing really deserved to be seen on a bigger platform. And I went back to New York and I started showing artists out of my apartment in New York, which via Randy Palumbo, I met a journalist who'd come out and written about his properties out here, and she ended up writing an article about my home gallery. It became known as a little bit of an art space. And I did a series of exhibitions. The first one was with John Luckett. I did a show with Tina Bluefield, a couple of shows, Tina Bluefield, that were very successful. Great show with Diane Best. I hosted an episode of Desert Stories. Cheryl came out with a group of people and they did readings in the space, and Diane designed a specific book of drawings and the stories and poems and things like that. It was a very fertile time for sort of connecting Joshua Tree to the bigger picture. At that time, it's really quaint to think of it, but at that time, Joshua Tree was not very well known. It was recognized as a place, but not really well known. When I initially moved here, I was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, which has since been defunded. But we were desperate to bring people here. Nobody stayed here overnight, so it just seems so quaint now. And so part of the idea with the exhibitions in New York was to sort of really bring Joshua Tree and Joshua Tree culture to a bigger picture, to more attention.
Now, you must have already had your footing in the art world to do that in New York.
Actually, no. I mean, yes and no. I was a very big art enthusiast, and I went around a lot of the galleries and the museums, but I hadn't been involved professionally. So the quick version of the story is, before I came for those 3 months in 2008, I applied for a job to work as the deputy director of Judd Foundation, Donald Judd's foundation in Marfa and New York. And I didn't get the position because I had no art world experience and no non-profit experience. The director liked me but couldn't sell me to her board. So I was frustrated, and that's when I decided to come out here. I didn't want to do corporate life in New York anymore, and I wanted to come and test things here. When I went back to New York, I started showing artists from New York. I also volunteered for an organization where I started doing art benefit exhibitions in a Chelsea gallery. And I bumped into the director of Judd Foundation at one of these benefits, and she said, "What are you doing these days?" And I told her, and she was like, "Great. You're working with artists, you're working with a nonprofit." And I became the deputy director of Judd Foundation. So that was my kind of art world trial by fire, shall we say. It was a fantastic and trying experience. Dealing with nonprofit boards in New York City is a very specific sort of thing. So, but it was a fantastic couple of years. I negotiated in that hiring that I could work for a week at a time from Joshua Tree, and that I could take time off every month to curate an exhibition in my space. So there was all within the work arrangements, and it was a wonderful arrangement. Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit. So what was your corporate work, and did it set up a good foundation for you to be in business? Because the art world's hard.
No, absolutely. So as I said, I'm very risk averse. I came to the United States as an immigrant at age 14.
From where?
From South Africa. And my family wanted me out of South Africa before age 15, because that's when you were registered for the draft to go in the army. And this was, looking in the early to mid 80s, when South Africa was involved in an active war in Angola, the height of the repression this was in the 70s. I'm getting it completely wrong, and really dating myself now. But the late 70s. And, South Africa was very repressive at that time. And my parents were war refugees. They just didn't want me anywhere near the army. So I came to high school, in New York. And so my thinking was very much about finding a career that I could, get both status here and a living. South Africa had currency controls, so even had my father wanted to support me here, he wasn't allowed to send money out of the country other than for my education. So I really landed here kind of on my own and had to make a go of it. So that's just the background. And I went into investment banking. I'm lucky to have very strong admin, sort of math and those kind of conceptual skills. Went into investment banking, absolutely hated it. Did quite well. It was one of those things, I think, being dispassionate actually served me in an odd way. But physically, my body started to tell me it was not a place for me to be. It's actually the first place I started to develop issues with my throat, which many years later, I developed a paralyzed vocal cord. And so I was very lucky to make a move from banking into the creative sphere, working in brand experience. I went to work for a very interesting company that produces live events and live experiences for brands. So, for instance, they do everything worldwide that the Ford Motor Company does. All the auto shows, all the brand launches, all of that. And I went to work with them. And this was in London. I was living in London at the time. And I'd gone there as a banking assignment, made the shift there, and then came back and opened an office for them in New York City and did that for many years. Ended up building a pavilion for Samsung at the Winter Olympic Games in 2002. And that really, the sort of the basic business skills, the finance skills, but also branding, and then really production. I had to manage very large-scale productions, building an entire pavilion, etc., and all the components that went into it. I didn't do it myself, but it was all managed, and that's really served me well in coming into the art sphere.
I'm thinking even the work that you must have gotten from here to your New York apartment with shipping and crating, and there's quite a bit that goes into that also.
Sure. I mean, the artists were very, responsible for that. The artists were terrific. They shipped to me and I shipped back. I did all of this on my own in New York, though, and I was climbing ladders at 15.5-foot ceilings. I was like at a really wonderful place. And I was, hanging things from the roof and very high up on walls and doing things and then patching everything afterwards. So, again, a lot of it was learning by doing. Which is the same way the residency has been built, really.
And how long has the residency been going?
It's been going since February 2012. So it's 13 years now, yeah.
And I've written and certainly seen many of your artists.
Yep, we're very grateful for that.
It's great work. How do you choose your artists?
So it's an invitational residency, and that started out because I initially shared the house with the residents. So it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. I converted a garage into a studio. I bought the property as a foreclosure. It's also important to say in 2011. It was just everything fell into place as I was leaving Judd Foundation. But it was a huge financial risk to come here and try and start something. I think everybody here is familiar with that. So I was really sharing the house with the artists and wanted to know who I was with. So it started with me inviting friends that I'd been wanting to do projects with, from the East Coast or internationally. And then as people got involved with the residency, I have a fantastic advisory council. I had an advisory council in New York, the artists themselves, and then I get out quite a bit, go to art events in various places. So we meet people and we talk about the residency. And then if people are interested, we do a studio visit. And it's remained an invitational. So I've had over 60 artists to date. It's a single artist at a time. There's now a guest house. There's been a guest house since 2015. So thankfully, we all have our own space. But yeah, and we're looking for artists who just at a certain stage in their development. Tends to be mid-career more than emerging, and it's someone for whom the residency can make a real difference. The other aspect of the residency is that it's project-based, so it's not an open-time residency. People actually propose specific projects, and we ask them to propose things related to the site, the environment, or the community. And one of the reasons for this, and one of the things we look for, is artists who are involved in research-based work or process-based work, where we can team them up with somebody here in the local community who's an expert in that area. And that way they develop relationships outside of the residency that live on beyond the time that they're here. There have been several successful, examples, of that. But somebody coming to do an environmental piece would, pair up with Mark Wheeler has been very generous, for instance, in meeting with people and taking them through the park. Local shaman, the land trust. There are so many people I should name, but people have just been very generous in partnering with artists and helping them with their projects.
That's a wonderful aspect to it. And it's really incorporating the local community.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's the community that brought me here. When I first came out for High Desert Test Sites, I think I was still in that place, particularly with going to galleries and museums, of very much looking at art objects and appreciating art objects. But when I came to High Desert Test Sites, you'd spend a weekend with a group of people and you'd move around from place to place, and there were dinners and things. And I got to understand very quickly, I was really very interested, I sometimes say more interested, but I'll say very interested in the community around art, or as interested as in the objects themselves. So the art needs to be compelling, but also, the person, the story, in terms of the artist, and then the community of people around them, the audience, the curators, the production people. There's just so much that goes into it. And I'm really, when I came to Joshua Tree, I came here really very much for the community. There were certain key people, Diane Best, George and Bonnie Kopp, Clea Benson. I want to make sure, John Luckett at the time when he lived here, who just were immensely generous. Randy Palumbo, Randy and Shari Alf, people who would just give me their homes to stay in and bring me in and introduce me. And I just came here to be in that community and then got used to the landscape and the environment. So it was something I had to kind of adapt to afterwards. I wasn't someone who came here for the landscape.
And how has that been, adapting to the landscape?
Oh, it's been tremendous. I mean, I think the real benefit of the desert, which is part of the mission of the Joshua Treenial, but of the residency as well, is that spending time in the desert makes you much more aware of just issues. I remember coming here for the first time and having an Airbnb, whatever they were at the time, it was an Airbnb, and then wondering where the garbage went. In New York City, I'd never wondered where the garbage went. But here I was like, where does it go? How does it affect the landscape? Water usage, noticing how beautiful land is, and then as you drive and you see it covered with tarmac, that feeling. But, spending decades in major cities really desensitizes, well, I won't say I'll say desensitized me. And I've just, over time, become much more sensitive to the land, to nature, to the environment.
I'm sure this is pretty obvious to you, but I'm curious, how did being here and being around other artists, having the residency, affect your work?
Well, it's been a bit of a challenge, frankly, for me, in that I haven't really developed a well-rounded art practice. It comes and it goes. In many ways, being around the artists and hosting the artists has kept me from the work. Not, they're the logistics. I could go and get another studio. But it's also just, when you see people who've been in their practice for a long time, it's very intimidating to think about kind of starting out and, trying to put yourself, in a peer relationship with people that you admire so much. So for me, that's been the next level of risk, has actually been sharing my work for the first time here and putting it into exhibitions with other artists and kind of just starting to gain, that confidence. But I think there's been tremendous receptivity to it, which has been, wonderful. And I think in many ways, I don't want to put it off for too long, but that's what I'm going to step into. But I'm in no way in a developed art practice. It's a sort of episodic art practice.
I understand that.
Yeah, we all struggle. I know that we all struggle with it at a level, and so it seems, I'm sure I do have a practice, but to me it seems more broken. Yeah. Not broken like needs fixing, but broken in time. So it stops and starts. But, That's the way it goes. I have this fantasy of a time where I just sort of dedicate myself to it. Question is, will that happen? Am I capable of it? All of that.
I mean, I've now moved from doing art in sculpture or painting or creating dolls, things that I was doing, to voice, to writing, photography. It's still different forms. There are those moments where, I look at somebody's art and you get so inspired.
No, yeah.
And you go, oh, maybe I can set up another studio.
Absolutely, and I get that feeling a lot.
Are you doing exhibits right now, exhibitions?
Of my work?
Of your work?
When the opportunities arise. So very rarely. I haven't really been, sharing the work that much with people, but, I was in one text work exhibition at Goat Gallery, and then after that, when Nicola was doing submission shows for the Whistle shows, her annual shows, I was submitting work and included, with that. And way back in March 2008, I actually showed at Art Queen, during that initial time here. But it's, as I said, it's been very, very, very episodic. And the challenge is I can't show my own work at my place at this point because I'm promoting other artists. So, it'll find its place, I think.
Can you describe your art? You said it's text, but is it on... Oh, no, you did say glass and different
glass, mediums. Different mediums. A lot of it has been made on wood. So back in 2019, there's an artist who came from Britain who wanted to do a collaborative residency. And so we collaborated together. And that's when I started kind of making text work on plywood, on strips of plywood. Generally, I work with whatever's around or what are bits of leftovers, and so but I love the format. So now I will go to Home Depot, get them to cut up a solid piece of plywood into strips, and then I make work, on that. And there are various phrases or ideas, and whatever things that come to mind. Yeah.
Do you have an art practice where you think about your art? Not necessarily producing it, but writing about it, observing something and bringing it into a notebook, say?
No, not yet.
Nothing?
Not yet. That's not entirely true. I do, when I have ideas, basically phrases that occur to me or interesting ideas, I do write them down. And they're, of course, in the sort of back of my general notebook that I use for all the residency and managing life. But they're there and they're to hand.
So you have a pretty full life. There's a lot going on.
Yep.
What does your art bring you, even if you're not doing a daily practice?
That's a great question. One of the things I've always said is that I've done a number of those sort of life training workshops of various sorts. And at one point in one of those exercises, I realized I really want to be in community with artists. So, what does that mean? And I think everything I'm doing is very much in community with artists and the art community. But I think, so making my art puts me in community or puts me in touch in a different way. And I do have artist friends I share it with, and I can have very rich conversations and do have rich conversations, with them about it. I also put art into the realm of making. This is, you think, and then you make. And by making, you bring something about in the world. And I find that very empowering. Out of New York City, I started going to Burning Man. And again, not very much like me in a sense, but I do sometimes just do things on a lark. This was early days when it was easy to get a ticket. And I realized that going there and building camp, I had never been camping in my life. My family were not campers. And, I lived in New York City. I lived in London. It's all, fabulous, but I never went camping. So my first camping experience literally was Burning Man. And I found it very empowering to go there, build a camp, take care of yourself for a week. And I think that's the same with making art. It's like you can make something and say something in the world. And it's about freedom of expression.
The actor James Morrison is coming to the Yucca Valley Film Festival.
Oh, great.
And so I did a story about him. He's also going to be on a podcast. But we had a great conversation. Now, he's coming from the acting world. But he was talking about, for him, art had to be something that was received, that he was in a relationship with the audience. And I've always felt that. I mean, I could produce a great stack of work, but if nobody saw it, then what? You know, it's like clapping in the forest. It loses something for me.
Yeah, I think, different artists have different feelings about that. And I agree with you. I very much do want it ultimately to be seen. So the seeing that's happening now is with artist friends, or there's a member of my advisory committee for the residency who's a sort of very well-regarded curator. And so I'll sometimes share the work with him because I know that he's very generous with artists. So he's going to, make constructive comments. So I do share it with people, and I really had no hesitation to put the work up at GOAT. It's just really I haven't done the work to get it out there. I'm not shy of getting it out there. And I do agree with you, it is something to be received. A lot of what I make is very dry. And so there's also that I think some people look at it and go, huh? And that's fine. And then every now and again, somebody really gets it. And, that happened at GOAT. And it was actually another artist in the community who just looked at it and completely got it. And, that's all it takes. It's like one person to get it.
That's communication, isn't it?
Yeah.
For me, that's the high.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be a lot. And it doesn't need... Often would be nice, but it doesn't need to be a lot. It doesn't need to be like huge numbers of people or all of that. But it is really nice to see it land for somebody.
When you were talking about the residency and how you pick your artists, invite them, you also mentioned how did you say it, where you could do something for them. Does that have to do with promotion, giving them a place to work in quiet?
No, absolutely. But it's also about... There's all of that, and that's, people really appreciate it. But we also look for artists who are going to come and do something new to them, so they're going to take a risk. I've had a number of artists doing that. And then also artists for whom we believe, we never know how it's going to work out, but that they're at a stage where coming to do the residency and to do the particular project they're proposing will make a difference in their career in some way. And I use, it's not a great word for the mixed feelings about the term art career, but in their trajectory, right? And a great example is a woman called Barbara Goddard, who came. Now, Barbara was unusual because she was coming from Palm Springs. And a lot of my approach with people suggesting things or that I'm talking to from Palm Springs is, well, you live here. We don't really need to come do the residency. But Barbara wanted to do a very specific project about African-American homesteading in the Mojave. It was a history that had really been not told. And she wanted to be in the Mojave when she was doing that, and Palm Springs is not in the Mojave. So she did come up and spend a lot of time here and do the residency. That work went on to the San Bernardino County Museum, the Victorville Museum. It was presented not as an exhibition, but she did programming at the Palm Springs Art Museum and got a congressional letter of recognition for that particular work. So it's not always that, but... things like that. There's an artist who came last year who I think you spoke with, Marion Landry. So Marion from Vancouver, painter. No,
I didn't.
Sorry. So you spoke to so many people last year.
Yeah, several.
So Marion came, and she's an amazing painter, and just at a point, again in her career. So she came, she did a 2-month residency, did this amazing work, did a very interesting installation where she hung paintings outside of the studio on the sides of buildings. It was very specific in the way she sees space and light and all of that, documented everything, did a lot of publicity with it. And it was a big element in her getting gallery representation 3 months after she got back to Vancouver. And that work, that specific body of work, is on view and for rent at the Vancouver Art Gallery, which is their main museum. So, when you can see, you can't always see it, but you can see the potential in the person, that this is going to make a difference. Not every residency has to be that, but we certainly like to see people. And I think people we get into conversation with who want to come do this kind of residency where they're going to be on their own, which is challenging. It's not most residencies, there's a cohort of people that artists are amongst. They're going to be out here on their own, in the desert, et cetera, et cetera. These are people who see a real opportunity and will tell you what that opportunity is, so you can get behind it with them.
I do want to talk about the exhibition, or what is it, the project? It's more.
The Treenial.
Yes.
Treenial, yes.
Pronounce it again.
Treenial.
Treenial, okay.
Yes. As a branding person, I've come to realize it's terrible branding. It's excellent branding and terrible branding because people really know it. It's developed a profile out of size to its kind of resources, but at the same time, people can't pronounce it. So, and get confused. They think it's a triennial, but it's actually been working happening as a biennial. So it's something I co-founded with somebody else. His name's Cage Bicer. He lives in LA. Somebody I knew from New York, from the old days there, but he lives in LA. And he came out to visit, and at some point, it's one of those things. It's murky as to how the idea came up. But we were like, let's invite, because the residency was bringing people, outside of the area here. And let's do something that could involve local people in concert with people from outside of the area. So he invited a group of artists. I invited a group of local artists, and we're on our 5th edition where a group of artists come together and explore a theme. And they're all sizable installations, mostly outdoors. There's one installation that takes place each time in the studio. For instance, this year, that's Coco Hall, because her stuff is wonderful, but it's not going to stand up to the elements. But also just because I saw an installation, she's a great example. I saw an installation she did at the Yucca Valley, Performing Arts Center back in the day when Michael was curating that space. And she did an entire installation there. And I was like, wait, Coco can be an installation artist. I hadn't seen her in that light. And I was like, I'm just wait for the opportunity that I can invite her to do something. So she's doing that in the Treenial. So it's installations, and then there are a couple of sound performances at the Integratron. So each year the Integratron very generously, the Carl family donate the Integratron for a night.
So how long does this go on? How many artists?
So it's 10 days, 2 weekends, and the intervening week, 10 days, 9 days. There are 14 artists involved, 11 installations, one project that's going to be projections on the rocks with live music, and then the 2 sound performances at the Integratron. But very importantly, as the editions have been going on, we're wondering, how do we grow the effort? And everything happens on the BoxoPROJECTS property other than the Integratron events. So we've been working over the years with other entities here, art institutions of various sort, let's use that word, art efforts that have somehow been involved with the programming. But this year, for the first time, 9 of them are programming exhibitions, workshops, talks on the same theme. So the theme this year is Desert Futures, the way the future has been imagined in the desert. And we've got, 9 partners all doing work specifically on that theme. So 14 artists at Boxo, but, another 20 artists or so at these various other places, all involved in the same sort of effort, just not, necessarily installations.
What an exciting project. How do people find out about it? And what is the dates? What are the dates?
The dates are November 8th to 16th, so it's, next weekend. And although one of the partner events will actually be on the 7th, Desert Trade is doing a workshop and a mixer, so that will be on the 7th, but the official opening of the Treenial is on the 8th. And people can find out at joshuatreenial.com or at BoxoPROJECTS.com.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Is it getting a lot of press?
It is this year for the first time. So in 2017, we got some interesting press, and then it sort of died out after that. But this year, so one of my executive committee members is a curator, Daniel Cornell, who used to be the head curator at the Palm Springs Art Museum. The other person is Stephen Biller, who's very involved in art writing, but in publishing, and was the editor and is now the editor-at-large of Palm Springs Life magazine. So this year, he gave me a press strategy. Never really had a strategy before. Who knew there was such a thing? And so instead of sending out single press releases with all the information, we sent out 5 rounds of press releases releasing more and different information each time. And suddenly, boom, Desert Sun has done a piece, CV Independent has done a piece, Gay Desert Guide has done a piece. We're going to be featured in Palm Springs Life Cultural Edition as one of the 2 featured efforts. That'll come out next week. It's their annual culture issue. I have somebody coming via one of the artists tomorrow to talk to me who writes for Hyperallergic. So that's a big national effort. And who knows about LA? In the past, we've had a little bit of coverage in Artillery magazine, but they're under new ownership and that writer's not working with them anymore. So, but it's just been really, really nice to get, more impact and interesting to see how you actually need to undertake a strategy.
Are there other, what do I want to say, not shows, but artists, are there more artists coming for the rest of the year to the residency?
No, because the work from the Treenial will be up till the end of the year. There just won't be programming that's happening on site or formal exhibition hours, but people are welcome to come and see the work by appointment, which just means getting in touch with me via the website. So the work stays up. We continue to, share it with people because it's large-scale work. So it's a pity to just have it up for, a weekend, 2 weekends. And one piece is an entire Adobe building this year got built, an entire Adobe structure. So that's going to be there for a couple of years at least. So, yeah, there are plenty of opportunities. Next year, the residency starts again in January. Just today, spoke with the January artist, and it's full. We're booking people into 27. So next year, there are 5 residencies happening, and people will be able to see some of the Treenial work at the same time as well.
It's really fascinating. How would you, let's go off of that for a moment and talk about your life. How would you describe your life in terms of art, creative? How has it guided you, challenged you, given you resilience, all of those things?
Yeah, I think, let me restart that one, because I think, art has been central, again, in this idea of community. So for me, the resilience has really come and the inspiration has come from the community of people around me doing the things that they do, and High Desert Test Sites was that initial thing. There were individual artists previously that had been very inspirational to me, just in terms of my interest in the art world. But I think High Desert Test Sites really, showed me how you put that into action and create community. And that's been, very, very powerful. So it's been a guiding force. Art is very much a guiding force for me. It's a central pillar. There isn't a lot else going on for me personally. So there's a real joy of having integrated my passion and my life, and there's a real challenge. Because the thing with that is, this is something Andrea ran into very much at High Desert Test Sites, and I'm starting to understand it now. My private property is becoming more and more public property, and people are running all over it and doing things and just coming sometimes at odd times of days just because they heard there were things there to see, which is wonderful, but also somewhat intrusive at times. And you never really get away from work. So there are those kind of, they're not downsides, but they're challenges or aspects. But to not have to make a difference in your life between what you're interested in and what you're doing is just a huge privilege.
Is there anything you want to talk about? Your life, your travels from South Africa? I mean, that's a very fascinating country with a rich, difficult history.
How did it form me? It's challenging for me to think back to that time because, obviously there's just, guilt by implication for being someone who lived in South Africa during that time, right? And I really didn't have people around me. My parents were Eastern European war refugees for whom South Africa was the only option, at the time that they needed to move, and they weren't particularly integrated into society there, so we weren't really integrated into society. And so I didn't really get exposed during my time there to much liberal thinking. It's sort of the system in South Africa seemed like the system. Who knew? South Africa, for instance, did not have television until 1976, not because they couldn't afford it, but because they were trying to keep images of the rest of the world out, and have people think that the way it was in South Africa is the way things should be. So leaving there was just a real freedom and kind of a new beginning. A lot of the influence there. One of the interesting things about South Africa was there was no social net in South Africa. There was a very strong entrepreneurial instinct, not so much of a sort of corporate life. So, or certainly in our world, we didn't know a lot of people who worked for big corporations. And people, we know some South Africans who've come to the United States, for instance, have had real impact and real drive, who need or need not be named. But one thing about South Africa is you really had no backup. There's no safety net. You had to just get on with it and take care of yourself and take care of the people around you. And a lot of South Africans have gotten a lot of things done. So I am, and my father was one of those people. He went there and he arrived literally with 21 pounds in his pocket and, not speaking English, and made a life out of it. So a successful life. So I think that, that I'm very grateful for that environment and for my parents. It obviously came at the cost of other people, though. And I think, that's something I try to reckon with. And so thinking back on that time sensitizes me, here to history and dealing with people and, implications and things like that. I went back to South Africa every year between 1978 and 2002. So my father, died there. In 2008. He died in 2002, but I had very strong friendships there, particularly with a couple of hugely successful international South African artists. So I would go back, still sort of wrapping up affairs there, but also to see these people and just, get the benefit of being in their realms, which was wonderful. And what really changed for me in terms of my relationships to South Africa was coming here, because it's a whole different ballgame to travel. There's a non-stop flight from New York. Here, London is halfway. It's a very different sort of travel experience. And I've only been back twice since I've been here. I think in many ways, though, life in Joshua Tree, I also stopped going to Burning Man not long after I came to Joshua Tree. I think the things that I was looking for in South Africa and looking for at Burning Man, I just live here. When I came in 2006 to high desert test sites, I really remember this moment. I was at a particular spot on Andrea's land, and it's like, what is so compelling about being here for me? The answer that came up was, I belong here. There was a sense of, at first it was a sense of home. It's like, this is home. And then I was like, this is nothing like home. I mean, South Africa, particularly, I grew up in very suburban Johannesburg. There's nothing like the desert. And then I realized it was really a sense of belonging. And it was the first time I'd felt a sense of belonging since South Africa. And I felt a sense of belonging when I went back there, again, because of the community that I was in. So, wonderful friends and family there. So I think I found that here. And then freedom of expression was something I was doing at Burning Man, and and also the ability to create out of nothing and all of that. But we find that here in Joshua Tree. So it's not a substitute. I'm not suggesting it's a substitute for Burning Man, but for me personally, I stopped sort of needing to go elsewhere.
This is a very rich place, and it's sometimes hard to explain to somebody that doesn't feel it or doesn't know it. I don't wish to be intrusive, but you've dealt with immigration, being a immigrant twice, your parents, South Africa, here, you. How are you feeling about what's happening?
Yeah, very torn, because I'm very grateful to be here. I've always been very grateful to be. I remember I actually witnessed 9/11 and standing in Manhattan. That's really taken me back. I'm sorry.
Don't be.
I didn't realize this is still so powerful for me. I'm glad it still is. I remember 9/11, everything came to a standstill. I lived below 14th Street, and then these fighter jets came overhead, and you had this real sense of like somebody was protecting you. And I felt very grateful. I didn't go to the army in South Africa because I wouldn't be protecting people, I'd be doing harm. But also here, I've never needed to go to the army, and I know a lot of people are negative about it. But for me, I felt a real sense of gratitude at that time. And I will say, this is a big segue, but in Joshua Tree, I have done a major art project with the Marine base and have come also to have sort of gratitude for the people there, that they're doing something that somehow, unfortunately, society sees as necessary, this society in particular, and I don't have to do it. So, I think, so I have this sense of gratitude for being here and for the forces of the country and the strength of the country, and then this real sympathy for people who are having such a struggle to get here. I came at a very different time, and I came under very different circumstances, and it did take me 13 years from my application to a granting of a green card, but I had ways to deal with that at the time. Student visas, work visas, all that sort of thing that most people trying to come here do not have the benefit of. So, yeah, I'm, very, very torn about the situation. And, and then the current situation, I think one doesn't even really need to, I guess one does need to say it's just, despicable. Now, sort of digging people up and taking them out is a whole different level of cruelty. Yeah.
I do think things need to be said. I hear friends that I respect and love say, well, people should just get their citizenship. And you're talking about 13 years.
Yeah.
It isn't that simple.
And it wasn't a struggle for me either. So it was just a matter of waiting. For a lot of people, they can't wait, for various reasons. So, yeah.
Nor do they have the means to go through the process.
Yeah.
I've thought about that a lot. Not in terms of the immigration process itself. My grandparents were immigrants, but that's a couple of generations back. But not that process, but how we perceive things. The quick answers. Oh, well, they should just go get their citizenship. Or they're taking money from it. All of the quick answers. I don't need to go through them, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and also the basic lack of understanding that we're just not birthing enough people to keep the economy going. So, just from a practical point of view, you need immigration to keep the country going at its economic level. So that's something that's really just not spoken about. And I don't know, I'm not an economist such that I know the levels of immigration you need, but I know that we do absolutely need immigration. And we also know how we rely on immigrant labor. So, yeah, I mean, they're just the practicalities of it. But then the whole sort of humanity aspect is a different thing.
And culturally, I mean, I love the richness. I remember growing up when my grandmother was in Brooklyn, and we were Jewish. They were Russian Jews, Polish and Russian. Downstairs was Italian, Sicilian. Grandpa had tunnels that went from each of the brownstones to connect the Italian family.
Really? Wow.
And the images are so rich for me. I mean, that's the creative spirit. Grandpa had a cart with a horse and sold vegetables. And many of the kids, some of them went into the church and some of them went into hospitality. I mean, it brought something, the food, the understanding, the spirituality, the language. We forget how enriched we can be.
No, absolutely. And that's something really that that I talk about in terms of going back to South Africa, what people didn't understand about apartheid or don't understand about apartheid in South Africa is it wasn't just a matter of color. Because of that formal system of apartheid, or not related to it, culturally people didn't mix either. So Johannesburg, South Africa was a big country of immigrants. There was a huge push to bring white immigrants into the country, right, from different places to sort of shore up the numbers. But the Portuguese community lived in a certain neighborhood and had Portuguese schools. You know, my parents were Jewish background. I went to a Jewish day school. We did not mix with non-Jewish people. The Catholics, Protestants, the Greeks, the Greek Orthodox, it was so segmented society there. It wasn't until secondary education, which I didn't get to in South Africa, that you actually spent time with people not of your ethnic origin. Very, very bizarre situation. So the richness wasn't there in that way. See it here and appreciated it very much when I lived in New York.
New York
for a long time. But personally, I felt more of a pressure to fit in. And I think that was the big thing for me about coming to Joshua Tree, was the first place I just felt I belonged. There was nothing I needed to do to fit in, or decades in New York, time in London, whatever. Loved it, had great friends, still have close friends, but was always struggling to fit in. Like, what is my place in all of this? And here, you make your place. I think that's the empowerment I'm talking about again. I think it's very empowering to be here.
It really is, and there's so many different people. Of course, you know Gordon Clark.
Oh, yeah.
I did a podcast with him, and he's a friend, and he's from South Africa, and an amazing photographer, artist. He has a whole different picture of South Africa.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, he's also from a different part of South Africa. He's from the Cape, and that is a very different place as well, culturally. That's like East Coast, West Coast. It's like Sydney, Melbourne. It's like there are a lot of these cultural divides. But he was in a place that had very different dynamics in a sense. But also to say, as I said, my parents sheltered us from outside influence. But I think Gordon was much more integrated from the work that he did. I mean, he was hanging out with like tough gangs, the gangs and things like that. He probably spoke Afrikaans, the second language, which was also the language of the gangs. It was adopted by several cultural groups in the Cape. I think we had very different experiences of South Africa. Also, as I said, I got out so early, and I think he was there much longer.
Did you experience any other countries in that continent?
I've never been to any other country in Africa.
Interesting.
Embarrassingly enough.
I spent time in Tanzania.
Yeah.
And I loved it, but I was curious because...
Well, as a child, we weren't allowed to. Like, you could go to what was Rhodesia at that time. But, most of Africa, like South African Airways owned an island in the Cape Verde Islands because that's where they could get to refuel. So you would arrive in the middle of the night on a really weird little, like, tropical island, refuel and go. And that was it. And there was a sense of, like, if you got anywhere near the continent, you were in danger. And I once was on a Lufthansa Airlines flight out of Nairobi where the engines caught on fire, and we did an emergency landing, and we, South African passengers on board, so when I was coming to high school in New York, we were not allowed to go into town, and so Lufthansa chose to keep everybody at the airport, but they would have allowed the non-South Africans to go. So remember, we were not wanted either, quite rightly, but it was a two-way street.
Interesting.
I couldn't go in with a South African passport.
I don't really know enough about it. Wow. What an interesting life you've had.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah, to start to wrap it up, if you ran into yourself now as a small boy, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I think some of the, I think certainly that, not to struggle so much to fit in or to be a certain way. There was very strong pressures. I'm gay. It's been written about by a guy called Andy Tobias, called The Best Little Boy in the World. When you're growing up as a gay child, in a repressive society, you got to be the best at everything because you believe there's something essentially wrong with you. So I was like the most model student. Very neat. I dressed, like all that. A lot of the things we associate with gay people were actually forced on them by themselves.
Interesting.
A lot of accomplishment and neatness and, that sort of thing.
And you were Jewish, and that culture has the same.
All the expectations, all of that. So, yeah, just constantly trying to, stay on top of everything. It's a lot of pressure. So I'd say to the kid, relax and worry less. I still today have a Sherry Elf thing on the wall in my bedroom that Clea Benson gave me that says, I know that worrying works because everything I ever worried about never happened. And I still have not learned that lesson, but I'd like the child to learn that.
That's great. I think that's one of the big things that humanity has to learn is we don't have to be someone else. We don't have to live up to someone else's expectation. And I don't care what group you are or what your background is, women, men, New York, LA, Jewish, Catholic, we all have that. Black, white, Spanish, we have a form of it. And I'm very into spiritual growth, human growth, whatever you want to look at it. And I think that the more we can let go of that, the more we can come into who we are.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the fundamental things I did here is New Year's Eve of 2014, I went into the Vipassana 10-day meditation here at the Southern California Vipassana Center. And I think it's been a huge part of fundamental change for me as well, just to go through that experience. And then since then, I still sit. I sit every day. And it makes a very big difference.
Would you say meditation and that inner connection for you would be the thing that brought you through life?
No, I mean, it came to me late, right? I mean, that was just over 10 years ago. But it certainly made life more comfortable for me.
That's great.
And maybe comfortable isn't the right word. I have found some ease through it.
Thank you.
No, thank you. It's been a really wonderful conversation that has gone in directions I didn't see it going. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for you, and thank you for everything you do here. You're a great example of what I'm talking about.
Oh, thank you. I love this community. We're both going to cry. Okay. We can close now.
Okay.
That was my conversation with Bernard Leibov. Listening to him, I was reminded that belonging isn't something we find, it's something we build, moment by moment, through courage, generosity, and the willingness to be seen. Through BoxoPROJECTS and the Joshua Treenial, Bernard has created a place where hundreds of artists can dream in the desert light. But behind that public success is a quieter story. Like many of us, he came here searching for meaning. In building community, he found himself. The desert has a way of stripping life to its essentials. It shows us what matters and what endures. You can learn more about the Joshua Treenial Desert Futures at joshuatriennial.com or BoxoPROJECTS.com. I'm Hilary Sloane, and this is Driftwood Conversations. May these stories remind you that transformation often begins in solitude, and that both art and community are born from love and attention. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and refer it to friends. Thank you.